For episode 6, we have Aaron Johnson, who is an audio engineer and a podcaster. The Cascadian Beer podcast is Aaron's, but he is also involved with over a dozen other podcasts. We also discuss a project called Jar Audio, which sees Aaron and a few other individuals helping other businesses launch their own podcast. This episode was ultra valuable to me, not only as an audience member, but as someone who is trying to put together a successful podcast. So naturally, I learned a lot from this episode. And one thing I've been working on in the background of the show is to supplement the material in each episode. I've been writing a blog post per episode. And this generally includes emphasis on what I've learned, things that went on during the recording or publishing of the episode, insight into everything that I've done up until now. And it also gives me an opportunity to reshare everything that the guests have to offer. So please check out the blog. You can do it of two ways: on our website, amalgampodcast.com/blog, or you can hit the menu button in the top left and hit blog. The other way is the Apple News app. If you're on iOS, check out Amalgam Podcast Blog in the Apple News app. So if you will, after this episode, please check out the blog. I'd much appreciate it. And enjoy. Welcome, everybody, to the Amalgam Podcast. This is the 6th episode. I have an old friend, Aaron Johnson, with me. He's an audio engineer, a podcaster, and he's a creator of sound and the silence between. What's going on, Aaron? How you doing, man?
Hey, Corbin. Good to hear from you, buddy.
Thank you very much.
It's been a while.
Yeah, I know. It's been, we were trying to count that down before we started the podcast, and Aaron came up with about 14 years, which doesn't feel like that long, but
no, it's amazing what happens in that time span. So.
Yeah, and you have been very busy. Can you talk about some of the podcasts you're involved with? You've got a few.
Yeah, so my own podcast, which started as a hobby and then kind of spun off into other things, is the Cascadian Beer podcast, where I travel around the Pacific Northwest and get the backstories on the breweries. So it's not a beer review show. I don't personally believe in beer reviews. I think you should just try it and see what you like.
Right. A little subjective.
Yeah. And I am interested in the small business story because I lived in New Zealand for a number of years, and there was actually this event that I can trace back to the seed of this idea starting.
Awesome.
A friend and I we just had Friday drinks together all the time at each other's places. We were so excited that this new brew pub was opening up in Auckland, where we were living, like right downtown. So we went rushing down there on opening night, and none of their beer was on tap. And we're like, well, why'd you guys open? So we got a bottle of something out of the fridge. And then I saw the owner of the place, who I randomly met like a week or so earlier, starting to mash in on the brew system. So he's starting to make a brew. And so we poked our heads back and I went, "Hey man, how you doing?" And he goes, yeah, all good. Yeah. And I'm like, "Sweet. How long you been brewing?" "Oh, first batch right here." "Oh, cool. How long you been a home brewer for?" "Oh, first batch right here." And I go, whoa. And I was home brewing at the time too. And I mean, I was making okay beer, but I wasn't like ready to scale that up by any means.
Yeah, that's a jump for sure. Holy smokes.
And so I said, "Sweet, how'd you learn how to brew?" And he goes, "Oh, I read a book." Oh,
nice.
Okay. And then I asked him, "Cool, how are you financing this?" And he goes, "Oh, I remortgaged the house. Wife's not that happy."
Woo, dude.
Yeah. And I literally watched this guy make his first batch of beer on I think it was like a 7 or 10 barrel system.
Okay, so what is that in the grand scheme of things? How big is that?
I always get confused because I always talk barrels with everybody, but then I have the struggle of remembering the actual size because I work in metric and imperial too. So let's see here.
You've changed.
Yeah.
Just
yes. A barrel is roughly 26 US gallons.
Okay.
So times that by 7 times. Yeah. So, yeah. So,
and the mortgage and all of everything else involved. That's a lot. That's a lot to ride on the first batch of beer.
But yeah, I watched this guy make his first batch of beer, and sadly he was he was done after 2 years. So,
Okay.
but that story always stuck in the back of my mind. And I found myself whenever I went to a new brewery, kind of seeking out the management or just asking members of staff and just very curious about the story about how they started. And so then I moved back to the Pacific Northwest and was kind of looking for a new project to do and wanted to kind of get into more interview styles because I'd mostly been doing like music interviews previous to that. And I was kind of looking for kind of mini documentaries and getting into that style more. And so it was just a fun hobby. And from that kind of spun off into other things, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah. And a couple of those other things are, you were talking about 2 other podcasts. You have Aaron the Tech and Jar Audio, right?
Yes. So Aaron the Tech started first. So yeah, actually coming up here in the next couple of days when we're recording this episode, I actually was let go from a job that I had here in Vancouver, BC in broadcasting, just financial shuffles and, it's happens.
Yeah.
And I came home pretty bummed that day thinking, oh, what am I going to do? Right. Like, cause I knew everything in my field wasn't quite open at the time. I guess is the right word. Like the opportunities weren't quite there. And I didn't make a public announcement of anything. And somebody called me up that day and went, hey man, I love the sound of your beer podcast. Can you make mine sound like that?
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I went, sure. Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
So that's kind of how it started. And then they referred somebody else to me and then they referred somebody else to me. And then.
So is that the real kickoff of your freelance audio? Because are you freelancing audio engineering essentially, right? Similar to, okay. So is that what really kicked off the freelance part, or have you always done freelance?
There's been some like side music projects for friends, like doing just mix downs for them and mastering and recording people, and then just my odd thing. But this has been the most serious employment in terms of working for myself. And now I'm sitting at 15 clients, and it's been a year, and
that's amazing.
It's coming up to a year, and something that I'm really excited to say is my work that I do each week just from my laptop is now reaching roughly 1 million people a month.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
Yeah.
And how many total shows? I'm sorry that you said 15 clients, but that's all podcasts, or would that be?
Yeah. So that'd be 15 individual podcasts.
That's awesome. Which will collectively reaches over 1 million.
A month.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's cool. So you're the exact person I need to talk to. I need that to happen here.
Well, let's make that happen.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just joking. We small baby steps.
Yes. Little steps always help.
Yeah. I need to learn how to interview people before I can expect anybody to follow.
So podcast recommendation right off.
Go for it.
It's called The Turnaround. And he interviews interviewers about interviewing.
Interviews people who interview others themselves about the job of interviewing. That's awesome. And what was it called again?
The Turnaround.
The Turnaround. Okay.
Yeah. Which one of my clients, the Solution Podcast, interviewed the host.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. It's interesting. And I always think about when I first started really listening to podcasts was a while ago, but not that long ago, considering how long they've been around. And I think it's going to start to replace a lot of things that TV, cable television, things like that. I think our generation is going to see it's almost like we're going back to talk radio from like the 20s or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I've worked in both radio and television.
Let's hear your perspective.
Yeah. For over, what is it? Over 15 years now, I want to say.
It's a long time.
And so I started in radio, and I always kind of had a fascination with radio and music. And I don't know where the radio came in exactly, but I do, remember listening to the morning radio program. It was Larry and Willie on CFox coming from Vancouver, because for those that don't know, Bellingham, where Corbin and I grew up, is right on the border with Canada. So you get Canadian frequencies over the border and that you can tune into.
Yep.
And so, I'd listen to the, bits of the morning show on the way to school. And yeah, their newsreader just has an amazing voice, and he really like, I think, well, he inspired me really to get into radio.
Ah, okay.
And funny enough, I ended up working with him
great.
at the station that I was at before. So his name's Kerry Marshall, and yeah, it's been really great to know him
and get that exposure and that real world experience. That's amazing.
Exactly. And it's just funny that the world just kind of does that, right? Like,
right. Yeah.
Like here, like I'm working with the guy that got me, kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
He kind of planted the idea of getting into radio to some extent.
Yeah. And you listened to as a kid, and then next thing you know, you're on a professional level with this person. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's crazy.
Yeah. And then like, I also at a very young age got to work for one of the local radio stations in Bellingham as well that I listened to. So,
right.
Yeah, I've been pretty lucky in that sense.
When it comes to your broadcasting experience I'm sorry, correct me, where you were in Vancouver, BC for the broadcasting company. Were you working in Canada, or where were you when you were working with just a broadcasting company?
So let's see here. So how about I go back to the beginning here of
yeah.
So I started in radio just after I turned 15, and that was with Cugs, which is a college radio station in Bellingham. And I went in there and made a really crappy album that I thought was awesome at the time, and accidentally met the program director there, and we just started having a conversation, and he said, "Hey, you know what? I really like you. Here's a form, fill it out, and we'll see if we can get you on the air." And they put me on 5 o'clock drive on Fridays.
Wow, that's a good spot.
Yeah, it was the name of the show was just kind of the rotator show where all the new people come in and basically learn on the air how to be radio.
That's intimidating.
Yeah, just ever so slightly, and no better way to like crush your confidence. Yeah. Faster.
Yeah.
Because you walk in there like, oh yeah, this is easy, and then like the minute the mic goes on, you're like, ooh,
you just
wait a minute. You just forget. Oh, all right, how do I talk again?
Yeah.
And there was no automation system as well at Cugs at the time. I think there might be now. I haven't been up to see, but so you physically had to like go into their music library and pick out CDs and records to play on your show
and really prepare.
Yeah, and prepare. Yeah, because usually it was a 2-hour slot, but they gave me and somebody else like an hour split each. So you had to program an hour of music because they didn't have commercials either because it's a nonprofit. So they had PSAs that you had to read out on air, but there was no real commercial spots.
Beyond that, yeah, it's either would you take the liberty sometimes and just monologue for a while, or were you pretty straightforward with just music, or did they want you to do that?
Well, no, I was pretty straightforward with music, and met some other guys at the station, and it was around the time I was exploring new genres of music as well, and they invited me up onto their show, and kind of learned how to mix records together with them, which kind of spun a DJ career, which has also been pretty interesting. Cugs has been amazing, and I say if anybody really wants to take it seriously in terms of being a broadcaster, you need to start in college radio.
That's a good lesson.
It's a beautiful art form that sadly is kind of drying up. Support your local stations as much as possible. Like community radio, is amazing as well. And there's all these little stations throughout North America that do amazing programming, but they have a hard time reaching a wider audience. But it's a beautiful environment to learn how to just be on air and talk into a microphone, and it's so supportive.
No, that's awesome. Yeah. And so from that great wealth of experience, what happened next? Where did you go next?
So I then went to the local radio group in town, started getting some shifts there. It was mostly overnight weekend shifts. And then during the summer, picked up other shifts when I wasn't in school, and then graduated with you. And
yep.
I believe from memory, I was the only one in our graduating class that was actually leaving the continent for school.
Is that right? Yeah, and maybe some people, a year or two after graduation, but you were the only one right away getting out of there.
Yeah, like because I pretty much made up my mind like sophomore year in high school of like this is what I'm going to do, and I wanted to study audio engineering. Okay. I had a fantasy of being that guy in the recording studio and recording bands and mixing music down and being a creative myself, making my own music and doing all that. And then I went, well, okay, well, I don't think 4 years of college is a fit for me. And so I started exploring around and found this institute that was global called the School of Audio Engineering, or SAE.
Right.
And I saw that they had a school in New Zealand. And I went, well, I want to travel a little bit. I probably won't go to New Zealand any other way. And the style of music that I was really heavily into and DJing a lot at the time is called drum and bass. Okay. And drum and bass was really getting big in New Zealand. And so I went, well, this seems like it's kind of a nice opportunity for me. And then plus it was a year-long course and was able to get a student visa for it very easily. Nice. And I went, well, if I don't like it, I can just come back at the end of the year. So, right. Yeah. And so moved to New Zealand and started studying and met amazing people through drum and bass and the various other music scenes in New Zealand as well.
Compared to the States, real quick, drum and bass, that's kind of electronica type, and forgive me if I slaughter any genre, technical names and whatnot, but I've noticed that in other countries, electronic music is a lot more popular, tens times more popular than in the States. Do you?
Especially at the time when I was into it. I mean, there is a video of a mutual friend of ours, Nick and I, at an assembly at our high school. Awesome. And I did do a quick drum and bass set in that school, and I look at it, I'm just like, I was just totally in the zone when I did that set. But I mean, like looking at the video, everybody is just, it's that weird thing of you're so passionate about what you're doing and you're performing in front of people, but you're completely unaware of the cringeworthiness of, everybody's like, okay, when's this going to stop? And like, and Nick's emceeing over my set, and it's pretty funny, but
I think I remember that a little bit now. But I know what you mean when you're really into something and you might be, but performing is one thing, but maybe you're simply just explaining something to somebody and you get jacked about it, but then the other person's like, I couldn't be any less interested in this. It's like,
But that there again is a lesson I learned, and it really helped with my DJ sets because while I was doing radio as well, I was also working for a local company doing weddings and high school dances. Okay. And what I learned there is the ability to read the crowd and adjust accordingly, because that is something I've really picked up on in terms of, great performers, just any great creative talent where, it's a form of entertainment. It is the ability to see what the crowd is doing and actually be tuned into that. Mm-hmm. And like, I've seen amazing DJs that can do that. I've seen horrible DJs that are completely oblivious to their surroundings.
Right.
And that
what they want or something versus feeling the room.
Yeah. And, and at the end of the day, the entertainment industry of what it is, I mean, really the bottom line is you're just there to sell drinks. But
right, yeah. But you're right.
but also, there is that group of people that really respect whatever art form it is that they've come to see you, right? And the people that appreciate that really let you know. And
right, like somebody was saying. Sorry to cut you off. Oh, it was Tim Ferriss. I was listening to him, and he was talking about when you write a blog, it was simply his blog, but like you're writing for 10% of your audience, because those are the hardcores. Those are the ones who are showing up every time. They're reading everything. Those are the ones who are probably going to share word of mouth or something like that. So like if you can identify when and where to draw from the larger or smaller parts of your audience, that's part of the game. And
Yeah.
it's interesting that you came away with that. And I've heard that before, that a long time ago, one of my dad's friends was talking about a DJ he knew, and he was explaining what the DJ was telling him about simply watching a room of people and seeing the course of a night. He can kind of influence the ebbs and flows of that. So it's always been a cool job to me, is a DJ. That would be one of the coolest jobs ever. So
yeah, well, but yeah, like, yeah, reading the room. I mean, there are general rules that I've found throughout the night of just how things kind of naturally progress. But, you know, there's also other factors that could play into things, and you need to be alert to,
right.
you know, to read into that. And yeah, like just reading your audience is something that I've really learned from doing that experience. So.
Absolutely. So you're in New Zealand at SAE, right?
Yep.
Then you obviously finish, you graduate, and then that's when you move back, or do you stay in New Zealand for a while?
No, I was in New Zealand for 8 years in total.
Awesome.
I got a job with one of the national TV stations.
Nice.
And started as a presentation director. So basically was just in charge of programming play out, making sure all the commercials and segments of programs ran on time, and we were broadcasting throughout the country. Okay. And then moved into actually behind the scenes of the news program and looked after everything coming in and out of the building in terms of live video, and they're called line feeds, where video stories are like raw video or cut stories are sent in through our bureaus throughout the country, or just transfer points where we have cameramen just basically drive up to a hut and plug their camera in and then send us video back in real time. Okay. And then also managing satellite links as well for whatever live event is going on. So,
and live. So, I mean, all of this is, so it's stressful.
Yeah. You know, and like it was stressful at first, but I've kind of realized that I really like that deadline and working under pressure, because it kind of forced me into a different practice of, I only have a limited amount of time to make this work. And if I don't make this work, it's just going to be dead air. Right.
Right.
And like when breaking news happens, man, like I kind of learned to be very calm and patient, and just communicate clearly what was going on, and we get the story to air. Yeah,
that's awesome. And that sounds like a lot to be managing at once. I mean, all the different channels, and I'm just trying to imagine it in my head. I'm thinking it's as simple as like you're just queuing up videos, but where they're going and everything, and directing all that traffic. And
it's not just that, because there's two-way communication that needs to be set up. So, just for like a live event for the news program, you have your reporter and then you have your cameraman, and then they're on location. And more often than not, there's a link operator that is either taking care of a microwave link or a satellite link. And so you need to be on the phone with the link operator to get up and running first. Then you get a hold of your cameraman and make sure, white balance is correct and, colors are correct. And then you need to establish a link with the reporter and make sure that they can hear the studio and they can hear you. And, when they're going to be on air, so they're picking their nose or whatever as we cut to them. So,
and that's a lot. That's a lot, man.
So it's all these little steps and making sure that, everything's lined up and ready to go. And then you pass that down to the studio, and then the studio takes care of it. And then you say goodnight to them, and that's that. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And you did that in New Zealand, you said, for 8 years or 7 years?
It would have been 7 years with them. Yeah. I was in New Zealand 8 years total. So
awesome. And then you started 15 podcasts.
No. Not quite. So I moved back to the Pacific Northwest, and it took a while to find full-time work in my field. Vancouver seemed to be a little bit more challenging than I had anticipated. But once I did, I was working for a startup radio station, took care of the morning program and various other things around the station. and was there for 2 years. And then, stopped working there and started in freelance podcasting.
It's awesome. And here we are. So when it comes to a podcast, let's say I'm just a general person. I'm coming up to you, Aaron, I want help with my podcast. What did you say to me first?
First thing I say is, what are you talking about? That's in, what is the content? What is the content that you're wanting to produce?
Now, what are you talking about? No, it's
yeah.
Right. So, okay, I want to start a podcast about that. Me and my friends are really funny, and we just want to start recording the times that we hang out.
Right. Okay. So I then say, right. So would you mind somebody you don't know being a fly on the wall, privy to your conversation? If that's the case, then. Right.
And that makes them think of like, what am I even saying in those times? Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay, cool. So, and that was just kind of a little, I'm just joking around, but we were talking about this earlier, and that you better have a purpose and you better have a reason. And that's something that when I was bouncing off the ideas for this podcast, of course it started out just like that. Like it's real general. And fortunately, I had some people be very honest with me and say, hey, you can't do that because no one knows who you are and no one cares. So anyways, and that's what started off the creatives and entrepreneurs for this podcast, because I thought that's just focused enough that you know what you're getting into, but just
it's finding your niche.
Yeah,
it's finding your niche.
Exactly. So when you hear other podcasts as someone who produces them, what do you look for, or what do you notice first?
Well, right away, to me, podcasting is audio. There seems to be a lot of people that think that you need to do video with your podcast.
Right.
And I say no, because where is the value added content by doing video?
Right.
I would not sit down for an hour and watch two guys on a Skype call just talking unedited. Like
I don't know. Yeah, exactly.
Like who would?
Right. Nobody.
Or just a locked off shot. So I say, if you're going to do video, you need to be doing it correctly. Like, you need to be cutting cameras. You need to make your lighting good, and sound good as well. But is it really necessary? I mean, if you're doing a podcast about knitting, or, just something that needs a visual aspect to it, then fine. But then it's not really a podcast. It's a more or less a television program at that point.
Right.
So to me, podcasting is portable audio that you can listen to on demand at your own time. And so, number one, you have one job at this point, and that's to make it sound good.
Right.
And there's you kind of need to work out a budget and see what's best to see where you can start from there. Just a minor investment in a decent microphone goes a long way than just trying to record it off your laptop.
Yep, exactly. No, yeah. I mean, just in my case, I bought a Yeti, or a Blue Yeti, and it probably seems a little gimmicky to like the professional, but it's great. And it was like $90, and it's been doing me solid. And obviously I've priced out, stuff to move forward in the event that there's some money to grow. But you're right. You don't need to worry so much about looking the part. You need to be creating the content.
Yeah. Because and the same goes for radio. You are having a conversation with an individual. One of my biggest pet peeves, and something that was driven into me by various program directors over and over again in the early days of me being on radio, is you're talking to the individual. You're not talking to the masses. Yes, it is broadcast, as in you're reaching a wide audience, but the recipient is one singular person. So nothing drives me crazier than, because I just see this now, like throughout various mediums, of, hey, everybody, You know,
Right.
you need to think of the listener at that point.
Right.
You know, it's if it's a podcast, it's more than likely one person with earbuds in on transit or in their car on their way to work. And immediately when I hear that, and there are various people that say, you know, when anybody hears that, they immediately tune out, as in, oh, they're not speaking to me.
Ah, interesting.
You know, they're talking to the herd rather than me. Because the whole, there's a surprising level of intimacy with audio that I find that you can really draw somebody in and really get them connected to that story, or, you know, whatever it is that you're trying to present to them. So
I agree.
Yeah. And so, you know, just keeping in mind that you need to be speaking to the individual is probably the biggest tip I can give.
That's
anybody.
awesome. That's great. I'm writing it down right now. That's for sure.
When you go to record the intro to this show, there it is, the Post-it note.
Yeah, exactly. Just to kind of add to what you're talking about, when people want to go straight to video, you know, that's definitely something I thought I should do. And again, I had some feedback from some people as I was trying to kind of source guests and kind of scope out how I'm even going to get this thing off the ground. I ended up talking with an individual who I hope will be on the show soon. We keep kind of going back and forth just because of timing. But anyways, he works at a place downtown called Community Minded TV. And they have essentially a studio where you can go, and they have all these Macs set up that you can work on, and they provide all the software, they provide everything. You just need to kind of set an appointment to come block an hour out to work. Yeah. And you can also rent their area for these, you know, a couple hour block times where they will set up all the equipment you need. They will set up the cameras and the microphones, and you just kind of need to bring your own furniture and bring your own guest. You know what I mean?
Awesome.
And all you're paying for is the time you hit record to the time you hit stop record. And you would, you know, so I was like, this is amazing. This is going to look so professional. This will be perfect. Yeah. But like now, in 6 episodes into the show, had I tried out of the gates to start something as big of a production as a full video and audio recording of the show, it would have been a disaster. It would have been so out of control and so unorganized and unpracticed. And it probably would have been really, really demoralizing. And it might have even stopped anything. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And
well, like, and I also feel that people are quicker to judge poor visual over subpar audio.
Probably.
Because we're very visual, right? And you know, you can see something right away and you're like, that's not right. Yeah. You know,
you'd be able to pick it out right away that I'd never interviewed anybody ever with a camera in my face.
Yeah. Yeah. And then also just something else from my experience as well is I just feel like a lot of interviews that I've done, people just kind of forget that the microphone is in front of them when it's just a microphone, and it becomes a more intimate conversation rather than the intimidation of having a lens in your face.
Yeah. Much more relaxed.
Or bright lights in your face as well.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And to just close that out, the goal for one of the things I would like to do with the show, if it grows, is I would like to figure out to get a sponsor for somebody to sponsor, like to start out once a month and maybe start introducing like a special video episode every once in a while, but it's a ways down the road. But you try and keep things, you know, in front of your ideas in front of you just in case. But it's an amazing spot. And they'll broadcast it. If you're a Comcast customer, they'll broadcast it on like channel 12 or 14 or something. But you know, so it was cool, and it was a great space. So okay, right. So I bought my mic. I've got the program on my computer. I'm ready to record. What's the next phase?
Well, okay. So listen to your environment. What does your room sound like?
Right.
You know, it doesn't make sense to record something where there's going to be a lot of echoes going on. Like, you know, if you have wood floors, if you have, you know, just bright surfaces, like anything flat, basically, that can reflect sound, you probably don't want to be recording in there. Bedrooms usually are a bit quieter. Some people I know record their podcasts in a closet.
Yeah, totally.
And there's also some products online too, where you can actually put a housing over your microphone to make like a little portable voiceover booth, which is actually what I'm using right now to talk to you, because I actually am in kind of an upright space.
Yeah, it sounds amazing too. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I think this thing cost me like $70.
Yeah,
to put on over my mic. So
yeah, now you're a mobile recording station almost.
Yeah, almost. Yeah, like I've used it for a couple clients where I've gone out and recorded for them, but
in the field. And
yeah,
awesome.
Yeah. But so listen to the room. For my own podcast, like I visit the breweries themselves, and I'm there to get a feeling for the place, and then also, scope it out, and we can talk about various things about their tasting room and, just observations that I make. But I always make a point of, because everything I do is edited. So I cut out ums and ahs and pauses and,
right.
Any gaps, or, if we take a little break or have to reset, or, something interrupts us, because, these are generally the business owners that I'm speaking to as well. So they get interrupted from time to time.
Stuff's going to happen for sure.
Stuff's going to happen. And I try and find as quiet of a space as possible. Now, we've sat outside on a bench if it's a quiet neighborhood. If there's nothing going on in the brewery, like, we'll be in there. But a big key thing too is, in my situation, is I make sure the music is off wherever we are, because any edits that you hear, you'll hear the music skip in the background. And then plus, I don't want to pay for the rights of
yeah, and then there's that for sure
of having the music in the background.
Oh, totally.
So having to track down who to pay in that sense.
Ooh,
but
yeah, you meant best avoided.
Yeah. So listen to your environment, and let's make it as clear as you can and as quiet as you can.
Mm-hmm.
I was in Denver over the summer for the Great American Beer Festival, and I recorded my voiceover for the episode in my hotel room underneath the duvet for the bed.
That's so funny.
And before I got like mic setups and properly as well, like, I used to record my voiceovers in the corner of the couch with a duvet over my head as well in my old apartment.
Yeah,
so,
that's awesome. So, that'd be a funny sight to walk in.
So that's the glamorous side of podcasting.
Yeah, exactly. Behind the scenes.
Yes, but now I have a nice setup at home, and also have access to various voiceover areas as well. So I'm not sweating under a duvet anymore.
Yeah,
so those days are gone.
Yep, you've moved on. I wanted to make sure and ask you and make the audience aware of what's on your website to get a really nice example of what audio engineering does for audio. And could you want to talk about that a little bit and what that is?
Yeah, so I have that clip up there as an example for anybody that's like wanting to work with me, for me to be their podcasting editor.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a clip that I did with one of the breweries in Vancouver, and they're in a warehouse with a big air conditioning unit rattling away in the background, and the coolers rattling away as well. And so I treat the sound by EQing stuff out, using certain plugins like denoising plugins to kind of eliminate white noise and background noise. And so that's basically an example of what you pay for when you get a professional audio engineer editor. Is that ability to tidy up the sound as much as they can. Now, the one little asterisk I'll put next to that is you can't polish a turd.
Yeah, no, exactly.
You still want to make it sound as great as possible, but that's just an example of, it's okay. We can try and make this sound as good as it can, but it's always going to sound
what you're talking about.
It's always going to sound better the better you do it from the beginning.
Right.
So.
Right. And I had this client one time, and he had this video footage, and he kept saying this one phrase: any real professional can zoom in on that footage and clear it out. Right. And it was like, no, you can't, because you used the camera to capture the image. So the camera is what really starts, where the boundaries of what you call quality or not. It all starts with your equipment. So no, you can't just say some professional person and insinuate I'm not professional or something like that. But it was just it was a huge learning experience as far as vetting clients are concerned.
Yeah.
There's one of those projects you
like
lose.
another one I've heard as well is like, well, you know, such and such TV show, they shot all that on an iPhone for that one episode.
Right.
And I go, right. But they also had a $1,000 rig to like, you know, be a steady cam for that iPhone. Not to mention the cameraman that has years of experience of how to get the shot.
Right.
And then the production team that did all the color correction on that. And, you know, all the scene editors.
Oh yeah. No, it's,
you know, it's like, not, it's not like, oh, I'm going to pick up an iPhone and make a movie. Like, no, you need to know the process and the working steps. So, you know, you need to know the actual practical, you know, steps in order to create the final product.
Right.
So, and it doesn't matter what tools you use, you know, like what are you trying to achieve at the end of the day?
Mm-hmm. What's your message? So, who's your audience? Know that user.
How's it going to look? How's it going to sound?
Right.
You know, just
have a plan. Yeah.
And then work backwards from there.
Set me straight on this statement or not. But I would think that for me, I'm going to learn by trial by fire. You know what I mean? And I'm going to source as much as I can from people like you, people like Danny, people like Jonathan, who have audio engineering experience. They have all of this experience. And so you gotta take the plunge and produce some stuff, but then you also have to kind of attack it afterwards and make it better. And
there is no substitution for actually doing the work.
Right. You're right.
So like, and there's no faster way to learn something than to just do it over and over again and continue to fail until you figure out, oh, okay, well, this is what it's meant to sound like.
Yeah.
So like, you know, you mentioned Danny, who was on your first episode, like, you know, like Danny came down to New Zealand and lived with me for a little while, and we recorded stuff down there. And like, I listened to some of those demos of like music that we made together, and I'm like, oh God, I should have EQ'd that better. Oh, I should have used this instead of that compressor. And, you know, and, but then I have to remember, oh yeah, that was like, you know, 7 years ago. And
I've your first chops and stuff.
Yeah. So it's like, I've had 7 years more of experience of, you know, refining my own process and trying to make things sound better. Yeah. And, you know, there's no substitution for actually doing the work. Like what is that? It in order to become a master at something, you need to do 10,000 hours of it. Right. You know? Right. So yeah. And then, you know, there are the anomalies of people that just naturally
are good at things.
Are good at it. Yeah.
But we talked about this in the third episode. Sorry to cut you off, but yeah, there's a difference between the natural gifts and discipline. And if you don't have the discipline, you know, the 1 millionth percentile will be saved by their natural abilities, but the rest of those people who can't put the work in, not going to succeed. Really simple.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah. And so like, you know, the example you were giving of like, oh, my friends and I have a conversation and we're just funny. It's like, well,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. You can't expect people to buy into that. Like who cares? You know, and that's,
well, yeah, but like, you know, maybe you are funny, but you know,
right.
I mean, that is an example of, I tell a lot of people of, okay, like, well, you want to be an audio presenter, right? You should record some demos of yourself. Great example would be giving a presentation of some news article that speaks to you. You know, so you pick a news article that you really reflects on some meaning to you to some extent.
Okay.
So I want you to record a demo of you actually introing the article that you're about to read to me. Why should I care about it? Read a passage from said article and then explain why, you know, at the end of it, and summarize it. So that's
a great idea.
And then play it back and listen to yourself.
Yeah.
And then send it to at least 3 trusted friends that you can actually get proper feedback from. You know?
Honest.
Not your friends, are honest feedback.
So do you want to talk about some of the things that you've seen with it? I mean, obviously you've got 1 million people downloading or viewing the content a month. Do you want to talk about those successes and what you've learned from there?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of those downloads can be attributed to one client of mine who's seen rapid growth in their podcast. But it's interesting with just the wide variety of topics that I get to cover. in terms of an editor. Like I learned so much, like, everything from there's like lifestyle stuff to like a podcast that I mentioned earlier, The Solution, where actually he's now a partner of mine in another venture.
Nice.
He does a podcast about finding solutions in like kind of everyday problems. So he talks to problem solvers who saw a problem in their local community and came up with a solution for it. So
that sounds awesome.
Yeah. So that's the Solution podcast.
The Solution podcast.
Yeah. And there's a woman called Robin that does this whole podcast about homeschooling. And I just had no idea. And I've learned so much just from like homeschooling and unschooling just by listening to her podcast. And that's called Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids. So that's
awesome.
That's a fun one to work with. Another great one too would be called Man Talks, where it's basically a community of men around North America, and they have a wide reach around the world because of the podcast. But it's just their tagline is just building better men, and it's all about like relationships and finding your purpose, and so there's great inspirational stuff that Connor does and talks about with his guests every week. And
that does sound good, and it's some of that honest stuff where you're talking about what it is to be a man or whatever. And when I hear man talk, I think man talk and like guitar stuff.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, and then you explain it and it's like, oh, that sounds nice. That sounds
well, yeah. But like for, it's trying to explore like, what does it mean to be a man in modern society, and what is the actual role of masculinity? And then there's other topics too, like, there are female guests on, and they talk about relationships and stuff from either side. So I mean,
that's good.
It's definitely a great resource. And then there's a couple other projects that just haven't quite launched yet, but they're kind of sitting there ready to go. So like those are some independent things that I work on. And then so the second thing that I mentioned too, where I have a partner on, Roger, and another friend of mine, her name's Jen. We've started this this company called Jar Audio.
Right.
And we are hired by companies to produce branded podcasts for them. So Jen has a background working for the National Film Board in Canada, worked for CBC, has done various radio documentaries, and is a storyteller and teaches creative writing at UBC.
Wow, that's awesome.
And Roger's into marketing and advertising. And then myself, I'm the audio technical guy. Mm-hmm. And we've been hired by companies to come in and help them produce podcast series. We've recently launched one that debuted. It peaked at number 2 as the most popular podcast in Canada on the day of launch, which we're very happy about.
Yeah, congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah. And so that one is called Well Now, and that's a podcast all about integrative health. And it's from Sage Wellness is the company behind it. But and that one's been excellent to work with them, just because the content itself is just I find it so interesting because it's different things that I haven't really considered or thought about.
Right.
And then a special note to that is I actually have also produced all the music and sound design in that podcast.
Cool.
So I am actually using some musical talents in there.
Good. Yeah. Getting back to that expressive and creative. Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Yeah. So check it out. Well, now it's up and running, and
absolutely. And I'll make sure to get links to, I started writing a blog post for each episode to discuss, for 10% of the audience, what I learned, or like different behind the scene things. And
we'll tell you what, we'll make this even easier for the listeners. I will send you all the player codes. So they have a playlist on the website, and they can subscribe from the players if they have a listen and see.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. And I try and link as much as what we cover, anything the guest is working with or working on, and try and just give people simply point them in that direction at the very least I can do. So I'll make sure to get all that. So resources.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's do that before I got it. I know we're cutting it, but
yeah. I'm a busy man.
Yeah. You are. You sound, everything you list out, you absolutely are very busy. And so
all right. So let's see, resources. So I started my podcast So this is all working backwards. So what was something that we were talking about earlier. So how do you want it to sound at the end? Well, when I started my podcast, I wanted it to sound good.
Right.
And given my experience of working with audio and various media for a number of years, I'm like, okay, I need to invest in some gear, and then thinking about the final product, like, okay, how can I best set things up to make it sound as good as possible in the edit process. And for that, I quickly realized that I needed to record individual channels. So I invested in a field recorder. It's a Zoom H5, and that is my workhorse without a doubt. It's a beautiful piece of kit. Where did I put it? It writes to an SD card.
Awesome.
And you can record 4 channels simultaneously on this. So it comes with a stereo pair microphone with the kit, but the H5 is a version where the top part of the player can actually pop off, and you can buy other attachments for it.
Oh.
And so I also invested in this recorder because, being the Cascadian Beer podcast, I really wanted to capture the sound of the Pacific Northwest and really bring people into the Pacific Northwest. So I really wanted to go out on natural sound design as well.
Okay.
So wherever I'm visiting, I actually do field recordings of the surrounding areas to really set the tone for that episode.
That's awesome.
So I'm actually recording stereo samples of, outside the brewery, or, on some hike or some, woods or forest, or, just wherever I am, I'm like collecting these natural sounds. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Sounds like a great piece of equipment and extra versatile.
Yeah. So the adapter that I was talking about, you can actually plug in 4 individual microphones if you wanted.
Yeah.
So I can have 4 separate channels recording simultaneously.
Yeah, which is huge. That's a lot. I mean, for those who don't know or understand audio recording equipment and things like that, I bought a mic, and I could only buy one more mic and plug it into my computer at this point. So then I would have 2 channels. And so this piece of equipment he's talking about can effectively double that, and it's portable. And I like the SD functionality. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it writes a uncompressed WAV file.
Awesome.
So, or if you're limited on space, because it is dependent on the size of your SD card, you could write an MP3, but I'm not doing that. I'm writing at 1644.1 uncompressed, which is like the highest resolution I think it can go. It might do 24-bit, but I'm only doing 16-bit.
Right, which is you're gonna notice that's gonna sound a lot. That's gonna sound super clean.
Yeah. And I mean, yes, at the end of the day, the podcast is being released as a 128 MP3 file, but I say, you always want to start with the best that you possibly can, because it actually will sound better once it gets crunched down. So absolutely.
Well, and it's very similar to what a photographer is shooting in RAW or video in RAW. It's very similar to that. So
So that's the workhorse. And from there, I mean, and then also the listener should know that this field recorder plugs in XLR microphones.
That's
as well
awesome.
as 1/4-inch cables as well. So if you're a musician, you can plug in like a really good XLR mic, and you can DI your guitar and actually record on separate channels with it. And I haven't stated the reason why it's important to be on separate channels, but in the edit process,
you might have heard a reason in the background of my mic right there.
Well, hopefully you caught that in the edit. But,
right, exactly.
But a reason why is if you're working with a stereo file, I should really say a mixed file, because truth be known, we're doing a double ender recording. That's what it's called, where I'm recording locally on my machine, and so are you. But I'm giving you a stereo file where your audio is on one channel and mine is on the other channel, so you can sync this up later in the editing process. So if that was mixed like a mono file, and we talked over each other, or you just moved your microphone and there was rattling over my voice,
right?
You wouldn't be able to get rid of that.
Yeah.
There's nothing
right.
you can do. And then also from just doing my own interviews, there's times where I accidentally talk over the other guest, or or they talk over me, or whatnot, and there's just things to clean that up.
Yeah, there's no shame, and just full disclosure, these things you're talking about sometimes removing ums or chopping it up a little bit because we took a break, or you stumbled or whatever. There's no shame in hiding that. I'm never going to reorder the conversation, is what I've told myself. It's, the order of it is going to stay, but you're right, because you want it to be pleasing to the audience. You don't want the audience to kind of be like, oh, they're trying to both talk at the same time. It's so awkward.
Yeah, but and then it depends on your guest as well. Are they a great speaker, or are they not? I mean, I won't say who, but one of my guests on my podcast sent me a note, and they listened to it, and they went, wow, you really made me sound like an intelligent human being. Thank you. So,
that's cool. They appreciated it.
And I'm like, well, no, it was a great conversation, but they were nervous. They've never done it before. So, there was a lot of ums and ahs and pauses and stuff. But in the editing process, I went and cleaned up and just tidied all that up, and they were very appreciative of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
You don't know what an SM58 is? It's basically the microphone you see pretty much anywhere on stage, and it is what else can I say? It's an industry standard microphone. It has been for years. So and that's a pretty solid mic. And then another thing I'll also say as well, always listen to your recording. So plug in headphones as you're recording.
Yeah, and that's something I didn't know or didn't really think was going to be so important until I watched, I was working the soundboard. I got to work with the guest Jonathan, episode 3, and, work the soundboard while he performed. And so I understood the importance of monitors for all the vocalists and everybody, and then the people listening to only certain instruments and the monitor and things like that. And that's when you get an idea of like, oh, you need to listen to yourself while you're doing this. And I've been doing that for this podcast as well. And there's been 2 episodes where I record with a guest live in front of me, and I set them up with headphones and everything. And I know it's kind of, I'm kind of being ultra serious and setting all this up, but it's really nice. Just trust me. And they appreciate it for sure.
And like from what I do with my interviews as well, like I don't want to intimidate the guests too much, because there are some people that just hate the sound of their own voice, or are not used to hearing their own voice. So generally it's only me with headphones on when I'm doing my interviews, and just like simple practical things too that you need to listen for, because you might have a kink in your audio cable.
Right.
And so there might be a short. So you got this crackly sound and it's cutting in and out. And then you'll get home and you're like, wow, that was an amazing interview. Like it was like a 3-hour interview, and the whole thing's ruined because, because it's choppy and there's like distortion in it. Or another simple thing, like how loud are your levels?
Right.
Like is the mic distorting? Does it sound terrible?
Right. What you've listed out as far as equipment, you're ultra versatile. You're ready to roll at that point. You can do whatever you want.
I mean, like, let's talk US dollars. I mean, I think the Zoom H5 is going for $300 now. XLR cables are, you can get that anywhere between like $10
right,
cable,
or $7 or whatever.
And then like SM57, that'll set you back $80-$90. So you're looking at roughly a $500 investment to start.
Right.
So and including headphones as well. Like they don't need to be top of the line headphones. No. You can get away with earbuds.
Yeah.
It's long as you have something to actually monitor your audio and then hear any issues, then that's fine. The way I look at it too is if I'm making this investment, I'm going to make sure I use it.
Yeah. Yeah. You want to get that value out of it, of course. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. I priced out some stuff because I just wanted to know what it would look like if I tried to, you get a board, you get, a couple mics and everything. And, about $500 for minimum is kind of going to what you look at if you want to have that real official setup. And
it fits in a backpack. Like I'm running around over town. I'm running around the Pacific Northwest with 2 microphones, 2 mic cables, and my Zoom and my headphones. And and just rock up to a brewery and just sit down at the table and we just do an interview.
That's amazing. That's a really cool setup, actually.
Yeah. And it's battery powered. So, always have spare batteries in your bag.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. That might be one thing you do once and you never do again is not have enough.
Yep.
Well, okay, let's end on this then. I want to ask for this podcast, particularly now that you've been on it and you've talked to me about it, what would you do to improve this show?
Okay, so yeah, I haven't heard the final edit of this show, so that's one thing. But you've done an excellent job, Corbin.
Thank you.
You've done your research beforehand, which is key. You can't just rock up and just do an interview. I mean, it might appear that way by a lot of hosts, and people that have studied journalism and actually been journalists can do that. But if you're just starting out in podcasting, the research is key. Like, where is this conversation going? Like, am I just going to listen to two guys ramble for however long?
Right.
Like, where's the theme and where's the topic? So you've done that. The technical way that we are recording the show today is excellent because you're going to get an uncompressed file from me of my local mic. You hopefully are recording the same on your end.
Right. Yes.
And then you're just going to sync that up and away you go. But, not every guest is like that. So again, trying to get the best audio quality possible. A lot of podcasters use Skype. And there's other remote recording software out there that, you can talk to anybody in the world and get a recording for. The number one way, if somebody is able to record their own audio locally, I would say go that route.
Yep.
Not everybody can, but the one thing that everybody can do is at least plug earbuds into their laptop.
Right. Yeah.
Or at least hold the phone up to their ear.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that improves the call quality vastly by doing that. There's nothing that drives me crazier than hearing an interview that was done on speakerphone.
Yeah, and it's a lot. I mean,
it's a lot, and more often than not, it's in a boardroom. And can I just say this to designers of offices everywhere? Why are boardrooms the most echoey environments on earth? Right, and then they slap these very expensive speakerphone systems in there, and for the recipient on the other end, it doesn't work. Yeah. No, I have no idea who's talking. And yeah.
No, those are tough. I mean, talk about uncomfortable, brutal people talking over each other. That is the worst.
Yeah. So, pick up the phone. Yeah. The phone call is a last resort for me. It is 2018. We have ways of getting decent audio sent around the world in a very efficient way.
Yes.
And phone call quality is kind of getting worse and worse because telcos are just trying to cram as much as they can into the existing line. So the call quality is going down and down and down. So we're actually talking to each other over FaceTime, but we're recording our audio locally.
Yep.
So that's brilliant. Like I said, Skype, and there's other VoIP services. I listened to a podcast the other day where the internet connection was so bad, they actually did phone each other on speakerphone, but they recorded their own audio locally with their own recorders and then synced it up later. And they actually pointed that out on the podcast. So, it's a little bit of time to set up, a little bit of hassle, but it pays off.
Yeah, that final product, it takes it so much farther.
Because again, bringing it back around to where we started, you have one job, and that's to make good sounding audio in a podcast, because you want people to listen, and you're literally in their ears. Yeah. More likely than not. And so why not make it a pleasant experience for them?
Yeah. It should be priority number one. That's for sure.
Yeah. And hopefully a light bulb's gone off for, somebody listening that says, oh yeah, I can't stand speakerphone calls.
Yeah, exactly.
So why would you think that that's acceptable?
Yeah, exactly.
For somebody else to listen to. So yeah.
Know thy user.
Yes, exactly. Well, the bigger question is, how would I enjoy this?
Well, let's end on this then. When it comes to, so you gave me some feedback as a podcaster because I'm trying to create a podcast, but when it comes to just general creative, so just any type of creative, do you have some advice for them and what you've experienced?
Yeah, don't be afraid to do it. I I've done very creative things. Whether it be, like we talked about, music, DJing. There is creativity to producing a radio show to some extent. There is definitely creativity in a podcast and creating high quality sounding art. But that also goes for other things like painting and writing and anything in the creative field, like chef, like, culinary arts. So a thing that I personally struggled with a lot is just trying to accept my own work, and also being very anxious and afraid to share.
Interesting.
Because it is such a personal thing.
Yeah.
And I think that goes for anybody in the creative field. It is a very personal reflection.
Mm-hmm.
And, you put it out publicly, and it is very vulnerable, putting your personal creation that you've done out to the world for judgment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And I'd say just don't be afraid to do it, because you don't know unless you try, and you'll only get better the more feedback you get and the more often you do it. And so that, I have a lot of creative friends, and that's just something that I see is there's people that just need to find their creative sides and really dial that in and just continue to do it, and just get in the habit of doing it too. Like, I've started up again, like trying to write more music, and I've done this practice where I call the 12-minute beat, where I just set a timer on my phone for 12 minutes, and I have 12 minutes to just basically make a loop.
Interesting.
Just a little musical loop. And that's trying to get me back in the habit of writing faster and refining my own process, because I used to not give myself restrictions when it came to work. Like, it was just open-ended, right?
Okay.
But nothing ever got done.
Right. Yeah, you have to have some structure.
And I was never satisfied. Like,
no,
like,
of course not.
Like if I kept a diary, it'd be like, day 42 and I still can't get the snare to sound right. Right. Like,
right. Yeah, exactly.
spend so much time agonizing over the EQ of the snare and making sure the compression was right, but it would never get it done. So, just listen to other creatives and just reach out to other people,
that's huge.
That are in, similar industries. And it's just the simplest of things that people tell you end up being huge. So like one musician friend of mine said, yeah, I give myself 24 hours, and I think of it like a guillotine, and there's a little timer on there. And once that egg timer comes off, the guillotine comes down, and like, I need to stop.
That's great.
And if the track is not finished, scrap it for parts and move on with your life. And that's been huge, because now I have a big bank of material and different sound design elements and just other resources of my own work that I can pull from, where if I'm working on a project, I'm like, oh, what would be really great here? I made that particular sound, a while ago.
Right.
Go into my own sample library that you've essentially created and pull that into your current project. So, and just getting into the habit of just doing it every day. So 12 minutes is not a huge commitment, right?
No.
So,
right.
But now it's forcing you to not, it's forcing me to not agonize over, is this right? It's cutting out that and making me commit to just getting something good down and not second guess it. So
no, that's a great strategy for sure, because you will get caught up on the details and the granular stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And like we were talking about earlier, you're just going to get better with time. Mm-hmm. And so you just need to practice. Practice.
It's awesome though. I mean, it rings true.
But then also pull inspiration from other creative outlets too. Like, I'm very aware of natural environments, and I'm wanting to explore that more. because whenever I'm working on music or even listening to music, I project myself into certain spaces where I can see certain landscapes, and I kind of get moods and elements and colors and kind of painting in my brain and trying to reflect those feelings back when I write something, as weird as that sounds.
No, it
But,
makes perfect
you know,
sense. Honestly, I'm right there
Yeah.
with you. I know
Yeah.
what you mean when you think of music, or if you try to picture the sound, or take classical music, for example, or something. Like, you might
Mhm.
know what the instrument is. You might
Mhm.
picture somebody playing it, but I know
Mhm.
I'm there with you when it comes to like a landscape and responsive colors to the sound and everything. It's
Yeah, like there's certain music that I listen to that immediately I think of like being in a fjord with like low fog, and it's that overcast gray that we know in the Pacific Northwest so well, right? You haven't seen
right.
the sun for 2 weeks, and and it's just that slightly damp, and then
Yep.
there's the steam coming off the evergreen trees, and it's if I can create that image, and then, well, if I can imagine that and then hopefully translate that out to somebody else, then I've hopefully done my job. But
Yeah.
it's more the mood than anything that I want to get across. So.
Right. Aaron, thank you so much for doing this. Thanks for letting me track you down and dealing with the
Yeah.
scheduling and everything. This is an awesome episode.
Well, no, Corbin, like it's awesome. The idea behind your podcast, a couple
Thanks.
episodes that I've listened to have been great, and just, own inspiration myself. Yeah. Just draw
Awesome.
inspiration from anywhere. You can learn something by watching a movie and bringing that into audio. You can, cook an amazing meal for your family and maybe write about it.
Real quick before you get out of here, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you, or what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah. So my website is Aaron, 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 the.tech. So so it's not .com. So it's Aaron the.tech. And people can reach out to me if they're wanting to start a podcast or have an existing podcast that they're like, you know what, I need an editor for this.
Right.
And I help with everything in terms of like even just kind of coaching people that have never done any mic presentation before, trying to get them started, as well as setting up all the back end stuff in terms of how their podcasts get delivered. It's like, how do you get something onto Apple Podcasts? How do you get something into Stitcher?
There's
How
a lot of steps involved, for sure.
There's a lot of steps involved. So, I take care of all the back end metadata stuff. How's this going to look on your website?
Right.
It's all that. And I'm more than happy to chat with people and see what happens from there. If you are into craft beer and want to learn about the Pacific Northwest, I do a podcast called the Cascadian Beer Podcast, and that's at cascadian.beer, and also wherever you listen to podcasts. And then anybody that is at a company thinking about, how can we provide some value-added content to our clients and reach a wider audience, can also get a hold of me at Jar Audio. So that's JARaudio.com. So
awesome. Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again. And thank you everybody for listening, and we will see you next time.
Called you out right there. You said everybody.
I know. I was thinking that as I said it. I was like, what am I doing?
Gotcha.
Yeah. I might just leave this part in so that everybody knows you weren't going to let me slide with that.
Yeah, no, I wasn't going to let you off the hook with that one.
Awesome.